The HOA president, Brenda, smirked as she handed me the document. It was printed on cheap copy paper, but the words at the top were in a bold, threatening font. Final notice to vacate property. She told me to call the police if I had a problem. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. She thought she was cornering a stray cat, but she had just backed a wolf into his own den. So I did exactly what she said. I pulled out my phone, looked her dead in the eyes, and dialed the non-emergency number for my own department. As the line connected, I said, clear as a bell, "This is Officer Miller. I'd like to report a case of criminal harassment and an attempt to use a fraudulent document to illegally dispossess me of my property. The perpetrator is standing on my front porch." The smirk on Brenda's face didn't just vanish. It curdled into pure, unadulterated panic. But to understand how a disagreement over a welcome mat led to a full-blown legal standoff on my own front lawn, we need to go back about 6 months. If you've ever had a run-in with a power-hungry HOA board, or any bully who thinks a little authority makes them the law, you are absolutely going to love how this story ends. So, make sure you're subscribed. For the first 10 years of my career, I lived in a cramped apartment downtown. It was practical. I was a beat cop, working my way up to detective, and the city was my life. But the noise, the stress, the constant chaos, it wears on you. My job involves dealing with the absolute worst of humanity day in and day out. When I clock out, all I crave is silence. I wanted a sanctuary, a place where the only sounds were birds and the distant hum of a lawnmower on a Saturday afternoon. After years of saving every penny, I finally bought my first house. It was perfect. A modest, single-story home in a quiet, well-kept subdivision called Maple Creek Estates. The lawns were green, the houses were neat, and the neighbors seemed friendly. It was everything my noisy apartment wasn't. During the closing, my realtor handed me a thick binder. "And this," she said, "is your new best friend. The HOA covenants and bylaws." I laughed and tossed it onto the passenger seat. I'd heard stories, of course, whispers of tyrannical HOA boards. But how bad could it really be? They're just volunteers, fellow homeowners. We all want the same thing, right? A safe, clean community. For the first few months, it was the paradise I'd imagined. I spent my weekends landscaping and finally having a place to grill in my own backyard. I'd wave to my neighbors, make some small talk about the weather, and retreat back into my fortress of solitude. I met the HOA president, Brenda, at a block party. She was a woman in her late 50s, with a haircut you could set your watch to and eyes that were constantly scanning for imperfections. She gave me a firm, dry handshake and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She told me she was delighted to have a police officer in the neighborhood, which felt less like a welcome and more like a warning. I just smiled, nodded, and made a mental note to keep my lawn impeccable. I'm a rule follower by nature and by profession. I get the need for order. So I actually read the HOA binder. Most of it was standard stuff. Keep your lawn mowed, don't park an RV in the driveway. It all seemed reasonable. The goal was maintaining property values, and I was on board with that. I had no intention of being that guy. I just wanted to be left alone. Little did I know, in Brenda's world, being left alone wasn't an option. The first shot across the bow came as a crisp white envelope tucked under my doormat. I opened it to find a letter on Maple Creek Estates HOA letterhead. At the top, in red, were the words "Notice of Violation." My heart, trained to stay steady in life-or-death situations, gave a little flutter of annoyance. A violation? I looked around my property. The lawn was fresh cut. Trash cans were hidden. No plastic flamingos in sight. I read the letter. The violation was, and I am not making this up, my welcome mat. I had a simple black mat with "Welcome" in white script. According to the notice, signed by Brenda, approved colors for welcome mats were earth tones, like beige or tan. Black, apparently, was too aggressive and not in keeping with community aesthetic harmony. The notice came with a $25 fine. I stood there on my porch, holding this piece of paper, and just blinked. It was the most absurd thing I had ever read. My first instinct was to fight it. But then, the part of me that just wanted peace took over. It was $25. A stupid doormat. Was this really the hill I wanted to die on? So, I went to the store, bought an offensively beige welcome mat, and mailed a check for $25 to the HOA. I figured Brenda was just a little overzealous. I thought by complying she would move on. But what I saw as a solution, Brenda saw as a victory. I had just shown her that her power was real. I had validated her authority. And in doing so, I had painted a giant beige target on my own back. A week after Matgate, the second envelope appeared. This time, a $50 fine. The violation? My garden lights. I had installed small, solar-powered LEDs along my walkway. They were subtle, meant for safety. According to Brenda's new notice, the lights were excessively bright and caused light pollution. A claim so laughable, I almost threw the letter away. The notice cited a rule about exterior lighting modifications requiring prior approval. This time, I got suspicious. I pulled out that thick binder of HOA covenants. I'm a cop. Reading dense, jargon-filled documents is my job. I spent an evening with a highlighter, and I found the section on fines. According to our own bylaws, the HOA was required to issue a written warning first, giving the homeowner a reasonable period to cure the violation before any fine could be levied. I never got a warning. Not for the mat, not for the lights. Brenda had skipped straight to the punishment. This changed everything. This wasn't just petty anymore. This was a procedural violation. She wasn't just making up rules. She was breaking them. I saw her that Saturday and decided to handle it directly. "Brenda, can I have a word?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. She turned, her smile as brittle as a dried leaf. "Officer Miller, everything all right?" "I got this notice about my lights," I said, holding it up. "It says I've been fined $50, but according to our bylaws, I should have received a warning first." Her smile faltered for a second. "The board has decided to streamline the process for repeat offenders," she said coolly. "Repeat offenders?" I asked. "Brenda, my only other violation was a welcome mat, which I fixed immediately." "Compliance doesn't erase the initial violation," she shot back. "You, of all people, should understand the importance of upholding the rules." The conversation was going nowhere. I realized a direct appeal to reason was pointless. So I shifted my strategy. I created a case file, just like at work. I took photos of the beige doormat and the garden lights. I saved every letter. I started a log, documenting every interaction. The notices kept coming. The fine for the lights doubled to $100. Then a $200 fine for a quarter-sized oil spot on my driveway, which the letter called a hazardous material violation. Each notice was more unhinged than the last, and each one skipped the legally required warning period. I refused to pay any more of them. I was building my case, brick by brick. I tried to attend the next HOA board meeting. When the floor opened for homeowner concerns, I stood up. Before I could even finish my first sentence, Brenda cut me off. "Mr. Miller, this is not the venue for your ongoing violations," she said, with dripping condescension. "If you wish to dispute them, do so in writing." "I have," I said. "But my disputes are being ignored, and the fines are escalating in violation of our own procedures." "That is your interpretation," she said dismissively. "Next!" The other homeowners stared at their feet, clearly intimidated. I walked out of that meeting knowing this would not end with a conversation. This would end with a confrontation. My file grew thicker. With her creative math and late fees, the fines had snowballed to over $1,000. My silence was clearly driving Brenda insane. Then she escalated. I received a letter by certified mail, a notice of intent to file a lien. My blood ran cold. This was no longer a game. An HOA lien is a serious legal tool. In many states, an unpaid lien can lead to foreclosure. They could actually try to force the sale of my house to satisfy a debt built on welcome mats and imaginary light pollution. Brenda wasn't just trying to bully me, she was trying to take my home. That's when the switch flipped. The calm, conflict-averse neighbor was gone. In his place was a detective. This was no longer an HOA dispute. It was an investigation. I took a few days off work and went to the county law library, cross-referencing state statutes with our HOA's governing documents. And what I found was pure gold. First, I confirmed what I already suspected. Our bylaws explicitly required a warning before any fine. Her failure to do this invalidated every single dollar she claimed I owed. Second, I dug into the lien and foreclosure process. The law was crystal clear. While an HOA can foreclose for unpaid fines, the process is incredibly strict. They can't just decide to do it. They have to prove in court that the debt is valid and that they followed all their own rules. My meticulous file would turn their claim into Swiss cheese in front of a judge. Third, and this was the beautiful part, I researched the criminal code. While police usually stay out of civil HOA matters, Brenda was getting dangerously close to crossing a line. By knowingly filing a lien based on fraudulent fines and issuing threats, she was entering the territory of harassment and coercion. What she was doing wasn't just a nuisance, it was arguably criminal. I printed out statutes, highlighted sections, and organized my findings. My case file was now a weapon. It had the bylaws, photos, the certified letter, and printouts of the state laws Brenda was breaking. She thought she was wielding the law like a club. I was about to show her what it looked like when used as a scalpel. Brenda's fury reached its peak about a week later. A loud, aggressive knock echoed through my house. I opened the door to find Brenda on my porch with her two board member cronies, Gary and Susan, standing behind her like discount bodyguards. Brenda's face was a mask of smug triumph. "Officer Miller," she said, her voice dripping with venom, "your refusal to comply has left the board with no alternative." She thrust a paper at my chest. The top read, "Final notice to vacate property." The document was an amateurish mess. It claimed that due to my flagrant violations, I was being evicted. It said I had 30 days to vacate before the HOA would take possession of the property and have me removed by law enforcement. I read it, and a slow smile spread across my face. I couldn't help it. It was the single most legally illiterate document I had ever seen. An HOA is not a landlord. They cannot evict you. To take your home, they have to sue you, go through the courts, and win a foreclosure judgment. A long, expensive, and difficult legal process. This document was a scare tactic, a bluff of epic proportions. This was the final, fatal overreach. "You are to be out of this house in 30 days, Brenda declared. "On day 31, we are changing the locks." I folded the paper neatly. "Brenda," I said calmly, "do you have any idea what you've just done?" "I've done my duty," she snapped. "No," I said, my voice dropping to the register I use when I'm about to cuff someone. "You've just handed me a document that misrepresents itself as a legal eviction notice in an attempt to threaten me. And you just made the mistake of telling me to call the police." I pulled out my phone and dialed the non-emergency number. As it rang, Brenda's smug expression began to waver. "Hey, Deb, it's Miller," I said. "I'm off duty at my home address. I need to report a case of potential criminal harassment and coercion. I'm holding a document, misrepresented as a legal notice, given to me by my HOA president in an attempt to illegally dispossess me of my property." The color drained from Brenda's face. Gary and Susan took a simultaneous step backward. "She threatened to have law enforcement remove me," I continued into the phone, never breaking eye contact with Brenda. "I think it's best if I make the initial report myself." I gave my address and hung up. The silence was deafening. You "You can't do that," Brenda stammered. "You handed me a fake eviction notice and told me to call the police." "Brenda, I did exactly what you said," I replied. "This paper is legally worthless, but your act of creating it and using it to threaten me may very well be a criminal offense. An emergency board meeting is about to be called. I suggest you all be there. And I strongly suggest you consult with an actual attorney." I stepped back inside and closed my door. The emergency meeting 2 nights later was packed. Word had spread like wildfire. Brenda and the other 2 board members looked pale and shaken. When I was given the floor, I walked to the front and placed my case file on the table with a satisfying thud. "Good evening," I began. "For the past 6 months, I and many of you have been the target of harassment and illegal threats by our board president." A murmur went through the crowd. "I'm not here as a cop, but as a homeowner. However, my profession has taught me to identify when the law is being broken." I walked them through it. I held up the bylaws. Article 9, Section 4 states a warning must be issued before any fine. I was never issued a single warning. Therefore, every fine levied against me is invalid. I held up the stack of notices. These invalid fines were the basis for a lien threat. Then, the grand finale. And finally, I was handed this, a fraudulent document, which is not a legal eviction and constitutes an act of coercion. I explained that they couldn't just kick me out. They would have to sue me for foreclosure, and their case was non-existent because they had broken their own rules. "Our president," I said, my voice resonating through the silent room, "has exposed this entire community to a massive lawsuit. My lawsuit. If this board does not immediately vote to rescind every procedurally improper fine levied against me, remove Brenda as president, and issue a formal written apology, I will proceed with a civil suit against the HOA, and I will press forward with the criminal complaint against Brenda personally." The room erupted. One by one, other homeowners stood up, sharing their own stories of Brenda's tyranny. The dam of fear had broken. Gary and Susan, seeing the tide turn so violently, immediately announced they would not support Brenda's actions. It was a full-blown mutiny. The fallout was swift. That night, facing a lawsuit and a room of angry homeowners, the board followed the bylaws for an emergency vote and removed Brenda as president unanimously. A motion was passed to rescind all fines issued without the proper warning procedure, liberating half the neighborhood. I received a formal, and I must say, groveling letter of apology within 48 hours. Brenda's reign of terror was over. The humiliation was too much. Within 2 months, a for sale sign went up in her yard. Seeing that moving truck pull away gave me a profound sense of satisfaction. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the restoration of order. The new HOA board is made up of reasonable people who know their job is to serve the community, not rule it. The earth tone doormat rule was the first thing they abolished. My life at Maple Creek Estates is now exactly what I wanted. Peaceful. My black welcome mat is back where it belongs. My garden lights twinkle softly. My victory wasn't just about a doormat. It was a lesson that bullies only have the power you give them. The moment you stand up, armed with knowledge and unwilling to back down, their entire world crumbles. Know your rights. Know the laws in your state. Document everything. And never let someone make you feel like a guest in your own home. So, what do you think? Was my response justified, or was it an overreaction? Have you ever had to deal with an HOA that thought they were above their own rules? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed watching a power-tripping Karen get what was coming to her, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of sweet, satisfying justice. Thanks for watching.